I am a producer and a director. And just this past July, when most Americans were getting ready to grill hot dogs and look at fireworks on the 3rd of July, 6 young people, 6 young actors, 2 South Africans, 2 African Americans, and 2 white kids, and I and a few administrators got on a plane and flew to Nairobi. Our luggage did not arrive, but got on a van, drove an hour outside the city, went to a girls' school, rearranged 600 chairs, and performed a play with no set, just us and 600 girls. The play was Antigone, Sophocles' play from 2,500 years ago. And it was the first performance of 17 that we did in generally the slums, Kibera and Mathare, of Nairobi. Then we moved on to Johannesburg, where we performed mostly in townships, and eventually in Cape Town. Our last performance was meant to be on Robben Island, where Mandela performed both leading roles in this play, Antigone and Creon, during his 27 years of incarceration, but rough seas prevailed, and we did not make it to Robben Island. So here's this play that Mandela wanted to do, that we've been studying for 2,500 years, and I'm just going to briefly describe the play for you. There's a civil war. That sounds familiar. 2 brothers fight over the city of Thebes. One is loyal to King Creon. The other comes not to rule Thebes, but to destroy it. He's a terrorist. He wants to burn Thebes to the ground. The 2 brothers kill each other on the night before the play begins, and their sister, the title character, Antigone, who's the daughter of Oedipus, some of you will remember, waits outside the palace. And her sister comes out. And Antigone says, "Has anyone suffered ever as much as we have suffered? But now there's more. Our brothers have killed each other. And King Creon has ruled that the rebel brother, the terrorist brother, will be left for the dogs to eat. Will you act?" And her sister says, "In what?" She says, "Well, I'm going to bury the brother." And the sister says, "No, but the penalty for that is being stoned to death in front of the palace." And Antigone says, "That's not my problem. I'm burying my brother." She's captured, of course, as she knew she would be, and she's led in front of Creon. And then follows a 5-minute scene that people, not just in the theater, but in civic life, have been looking at for thousands of years. And it goes like this. Did you sprinkle dust on the bad brother? Yes. Did you know I'd made a law against it? Yes. And yet you broke the law. To which she says, "Look, yesterday you made that law, and tomorrow you will make another law. But there are fixed, unwritten laws that we don't understand, and yet we must follow. And if it costs me my life to follow the fixed, unwritten laws," that's Sophocles' phrase, fixed and unwritten, "then that's what I'm going to do." So why do we still read and argue about this play? That's the question. Why did we make this trip? I raised a lot of money from very generous people in a not-for-profit situation to make this trip. Plays provide aesthetic pleasure, of course, and they contain wisdom. But I think there's a particular genius to certain kinds of plays, and Antigone probably foremost among them, which is that they deal with irreconcilable conflicts. I don't mean wars that one side has a hard side winning, and I particularly don't mean by that phrase that there is a compromise. There is no compromise between Antigone's position and Creon's position. And many things in the world are reconcilable. We're in an organization that's dedicated to reconciliation and compromise and common ground. But there are clashes in the world, both in plays and in life, that can't be fixed. Justice and mercy famously clash. There's a point where you can't have both. The individual's freedom to act clashes with order. As recently as 100 years ago, it was illegal to speak out against a war the United States was involved in. In 1920, people went to jail for speaking out against what was called the Great War. So, nobody, to the best of my knowledge, no American went to war speaking out against the war in Iraq or Afghanistan. It took more than 100 years of United States history to allow that kind of free speech. So, at the end of this play, Creon, who in classic dramatic fashion has set out to do one thing and accomplish the opposite, he has set out to create order in Thebes, a city, a region racked by chaos, by civil war, and said, I will establish order, and I will make people drink bitter medicine. I will leave the son of a king on a field to be pecked by birds and dogs, and I will kill the king's daughter for violating my law. It's not an entirely unreasonable position. It's not nice, but it's not unreasonable. But he blows it, and he causes his own son's death, and he sets off a chain of events which end in misery for Thebes and for himself. And as he returns from a cave where his son has gone, it's too complicated, he comes back from the countryside carrying his own son's corpse in misery, in despair, and realizing that now other armies are advancing on Thebes, that his lack of wise leadership has prolonged a war, not prevented one. He turns to the city, the audience, which was usually young girls in schools, or people in community centers in Soweto or Kibera or Mathare. South African actor, magnificent young actor. And he says, why was I stupid? And she says, the sister of Antigone says, you learned it all too late. And he says, fear kept me from learning. And then, gesturing at his boy, he says, then fear taught me. That's pretty good, I think. That's pretty contemporary. Fear keeps us from learning. That's an idea we find in Antigone, we find in many other plays. But I don't want you to think that I have come here today, because it's a talk about cultural diplomacy, to say that the arts are the answer. To a person who has no safety, who has no food, who has no water, when we live in a world where a child dies every minute of water-related diseases, that would be about 23 children have died since we started talking because of a water-related disease. I don't think a performance of Antigone is the answer, or Hamlet, or King Lear, or any other play. But nor do I think that plays and music and art and other forms of culture are irrelevant. I just know that I want to do this play in Syria so badly. I want this project to continue. I want to go to the worst places in the world. I mean, I don't mean the worst, but you know what I mean, the most racked with pain places in the world with this play. But I'm responsible for the actor's safety, so there are some places we can't go. And I believe in my heart that it would have meaning for the people who saw it, young people and older people. Because when these kids watched the play, they didn't, like an American audience or a British audience, say, oh, what an interesting choice not to have a set, and Antigone seemed to be wearing sneakers and not royal robes, which is what American audiences would talk about, the aesthetic choices. No, these kids just argued about Creon. No, he had to maintain order, one 11-year-old would say. And another one would say, no, he was stupid. He wouldn't listen when people talked to him. And why, we would say. And they would say, well, because he was a man and he didn't want to listen to girls. Or he was scared he would lose his power. These are great wonderful responses to the play. We assumed these young women would all side with Antigone, and one of them berated her, saying, "Your action was selfish. It was selfish," and it set off all the other events in the play. So here's what I think. In my professorial role, but also just in my role as a producer and director here and around the world. I've just come back from Beijing, where I'm preparing to direct a play this spring, an American play. I think artists need to get smarter. I think we need to know more. I say to my actors, what are you doing here? If a child is dying every minute from a water-related disease, why are you in an acting class? You don't have to tell me, but if you can't answer that question when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, if you can't answer that question, then go save a kid's life. Because you don't need to be an actor. If you're being an actor for fame or fortune, get out of my class. But if you're being an actor to help expand and share on the human condition, then come to class every week and I will give you everything I have. So I think the world needs both. And to those who aren't in the arts, I would say, of course, the flip side. Please remember that theater and film is not just stupid pop culture. Yes, most of it is stupid pop culture. But there are opportunities to grab, and there are people in the theater and in film and in music and other art forms who will willingly join up with you. We just, you talk about proposals, ways of connecting with each other would be so useful, formal or informal, because we don't know how to reach you, and I suspect you don't know how to reach us. And that's all I'll say right now. Thank you very much. Mark's not here, so I think what we decided is we would do statement and then questions and then statement and then question, which is still fine with me. How long did I talk? I talked about 8. He's back. I think I was right on time, about 18 minutes. See, you thought I was going to go 23, didn't you?
Oh, well, this is good. So now I'd like to begin for the first time today to take questions and comments from all of you. What would be excellent is if you could maybe raise your hand if you'd like to pose a question or a comment. I would say keep it as brief as you can, just to allow as many voices as possible to be heard. And also, it'd be great if you could tell us your name and where you're from. I think we managed to actually get every continent of the world for this conference, so it should be really interesting just to see whether it's New Zealand or Africa or Asia. I've already met a number of you guys this morning just to see where you're from. I see the first hand here, and if you could also hit the button, most of us should have microphones so we can hear. And please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Andrea and I am from Colombia. About talking about art and culture, I just want to say that I have a social organization with friends, and we do therapy to prevent sexual harassment from kids, and we use the clown therapy. We study to be clowns, and we use the clown therapy just to get to the kids. They are from really, really poor places in Colombia, and just to get them. So, they prefer to get involved with them. For us, all dress up with our red noses, us. Me not being Andrea, me being my character. So that what you were talking about, how can art bring peace, and in my social organization, we can see that. We can see how art can pass frontiers.
Other comments, questions, please? Okay.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Mosher, for that. My name's Kate Lee. I'm from Australia. I work with performance theatre, applied theatre in various communities, development, education. And I appreciated your comment on the relevance of performance in theatre in different contexts. And also one thing that I guess I'm struggling with at the moment is how do we speak to other perhaps industries, partners, how do we connect with others who aren't in the arts? So yes, we have education, yes, we have development, but what are the other relationships? So thanks for touching on that.
Do you want to respond, or should we take it from
No, I love hearing from everybody. I'm sure everybody loves hearing from everybody, too.
Let's take a round of questions.
Yeah,
and
great.
Take note and then respond. Who's
Sure.
next? Okay, Manila?
Hi, my name is Kelsey.
Let's start in the middle first. Go ahead, Kelsey.
I'm from the University of Iowa, and I'm a musicologist, so I was really excited to hear from someone who is both in academia and the arts, and I was hoping to ask, what can academics in the arts be doing better, do you think? As musicologists, that's something that we grapple with often. So when you do respond to the questions, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Dr. Mosher.
Great. I wish I was a doctor. Just Gregory will do fine.
And let's take, I see a few hands here. Maybe ladies first, and then we'll go to the back. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Maybe could you turn yours off in the back? I think it only lets us do one at a time. Okay.
Thank you. Excuse me, my English is not very well because I'm coming from a fresh country, DRC. But I have two questions. The first, one speaker said that the principal purpose of UN Nations are peace and security in the world. I want to know why 70 years ago the UN don't work and talk to develop and the rich country to stop to produce the arm. Je ne sais pas comment on appelle arm. Oui, to produce the arm who kill the people in the world and they make a population very big poor. And the second question, we have many UN mission of peace in the world, but today there are many conflict, war in the world, and we kill population. What the UN can be in the future to be strong and stop violence who kill population, women and children. Thank you. It's not very well because I come from a French country.
Oh, that's excellent.
My name is Beatrice Lomea, and I'm a member of parliament in my country. Thank you.
Congo. Please, you've been waiting patiently. Ah, yes? Ah, okay. All right. Great minds think alike.
Zennebe Kinfu, Professor of Mass Communication, Russian Friendship University from Moscow. I have one question, that's my basic question. What is the difference of understanding cultural diplomacy in Eastern civilization with Western civilization? You know, the difference of understanding.
Professor Mosher, you want to give it a try?
Well, the question about East and West is way above my pay grade. You mustn't be confused by my trip to Beijing, even though it was my 6th or 7th. It is an understatement to say they are very different cultures. It's very startling to me to see all these pictures of beautiful blondes on what do you call this, billboards in Beijing. I mean, everywhere you look, the one young woman is blonder than the next, selling Western product. It's very freaky for an American to be there. I don't know, it's why I'm going actually to Beijing, to do a play in Mandarin, a language I speak not a single word of, to help understand that. And those experiments, although they can be organized by groups, can only happen one person at a time, or one small group at a time. I know these 6 young people, 2 of whom I bumped into yesterday up at school, have had their lives completely changed, not by doing Antigone, but by sharing Antigone with these thousands and thousands of young people, and also teachers and some young artists, but mostly just young women who they met. I mean, there's another irreconcilable problem. Finally, men and women are going to bump up against each other and say, I go no further in the compromise. Right? There's no compromise to systematized rape as a weapon of war. It's wrong. I mean, we know it's wrong. Some people think it's right. There's no compromise. So I think we just have to set up explorations and go do them. As for academia, you just need to go bother the people in the history department and the foreign affairs department. Columbia, as many of you know, has a school of international and public relations, SIPA. I tried to make very close contact with those professors. Many of them just thought I was a stupid theater director, which I may or may not be. But some of them were open to it and realized, because they thought about it for a second, that plays have addressed matters of international and public relations for thousands of years. I'm not even an amateur on arms control, much less an expert. But I do note that Creon is a warrior, and that war finally, going back to ancient Greece, the man who says, no, defending the country is everything. Defending the country allows me to suspend laws. I mentioned no countries. Always works. It just always worked. It worked for Abraham Lincoln in the American Civil War. I'm just suspending the laws. I'm in charge. There's a war. I have a country to save. It always works. And Sophocles was very wise about this, and as many great playwrights were, and poets and novelists, about saying, okay, we get it. The leader says, I have to be in charge, otherwise we lose the war or there's chaos. But those decisions have ramifications. We're not doing this for the first time. The last leader to say, all right, I'm in charge, the laws are suspended while we're fighting this war, it wouldn't hurt if, it's usually he, had seen a play or two, would it? Because history, as they say, does repeat itself and is more likely to if you're not aware of it.
The main problem is we as a human being, yeah, we have two eyes and one neck. Yeah?
Sure.
When we look in east, we don't look in west. When we look in west, we don't look in east. Which role is cultural diplomacy in this naturally problem?
Well, anyone in Europe or America who's not looking east is insane. I mean, you know, it's a lot of people, and in very ancient culture. Moscow, of course, has always had to look both east and west. That's the, you know, if you're Russia, you're whoa, that's interesting. In America, we've been isolated by these two oceans. But, you know, the president of China is on the front page of the New York Times today, above the fold. I think most people in America are very aware that China is going to be a big part of their lives. My students are certainly extremely aware in a way that I wasn't when I was a student of China and Japan and India and the entire East. And Korea. And I don't mean to slight any country by not naming it.
Okay, let's continue. Maybe in the middle. Well, if you have a mic there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roger from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm with Global Zero, the international movement for the elimination of nuclear weapons. My question is, there was a popular book called The Art of War, and I've heard many times that war is a theater. Is that a dangerous perspective to hold as a fundamental principle of what war is, as art, as theater, and is there a way to change that?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, you know, the first person I thought of was General Eisenhower, the last, you know, probably universally beloved president in American history, about 60 years ago now. Great general. Saved the world from the Nazis, right? No one person did that, but sure, we glamorized war. The Greeks glamorized war. The Greeks, Sophocles was a general himself, and many Greeks believed the best way to die was in war. That it was a great thing to die in war. But although the Greeks knew some things that we have a hard time, that are still true and we have a hard time remembering, that surely must be wrong. It surely must be wrong. I mean, I feel ridiculous saying this in the UN. You all know about this 100 times more than I do. It's one thing when you have a sword and a shield. That's one kind of war. It takes physical courage. Bang, bang. We have a kind of war in no way to show disrespect for the young men and women who are doing this. But we have young men and women essentially playing video games in Nevada right now as a form of war. Right? Operating drones. That's a very different kind of war. But I have nothing wise to say on this subject. You know, I mean, what happens if Syria, I will say something not necessarily wise. I remember the Cold War vividly. I'm 66 years old. I remember duck and cover. I remember the craziness of it. And I know, I have some knowledge of what the Cold War did in Africa and did in Asia. And when you start fighting proxy wars, and it is my understanding that Syria might become a proxy war kind of situation, and that spreads, and people are dying because Russia and America are in conflict. Oh my God, that would be the worst sort of repetition of history, it seems to me. But this is not my field. So.
Take another question coming from the back. If you could stand up, maybe. So
Hi, my name is Patrick. I'm kind of an interloper here, an old friend of Mark's. I'm a delegate from a small island nation, Sao Tome and Principe. But before that, I was a co-founder.
I thought you were going to say England.
I was the co-founder of the Bond Street Theater, and we definitely believe that there is a confluence somehow between theater and war, those terms, as well as the import of theater in these kinds of conflicts. We've done 17 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and it's kind of turned the company from a theater company doing social good to a social agency working with young women and youth of all stripes in that country over that time. And now we've gotten most of our funding this year from State Department. We've also worked during the Balkan Wars. I directed The Tempest, which was, I think, a great opportunity for me to work with children of war. All of these children were warriors at one point. And then in Serbia, during that time, we also directed Romeo and Juliet, which seemed to have a real profound effect on young boys, Serbian boys who were in love with Albanian girls, etc. We worked extensively with women of rape in Haiti, giving them voice. And I do think your work is phenomenal. And just to make a suggestion for the future, I run a large youth program here at the UN twice a year. And I have about 300 Chinese who come each time. And a subset of them, about 50 of them, have wanted to do work that involved theater. And I'd love to contact you after.
We will do that. Also, I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to know more about your program. What's the website?
Well, it's youthassembly.nyc. And it's gone into its 14th year now. It's brought us Ahmed Al-Handawi, whose first time ever in the UN was at our program. And I'll give you my card after.
Fantastic. Thank you.
additional questions or comments? Okay, yes?
I just want to say, like, we always talk here about North, like United States and Europe, Africa, but we like mention about Latin America is like really, really poor. Like I live and work for the government in Colombia. I work with the Ministry of Trade, Commerce and Trade, Commerce and Tourism, and we're just like, when I come here, like I want just to like for everyone to know, like we were talking about refugees in Syria, but in Colombia we're like also having like a big problem right now. I don't know if you have heard about, but like Venezuelan president closed the frontier, took out thousands of Colombian people that live in the towns just beside the frontier, broke their passports, broke their like identification, and they like expelled from Venezuela, and now we have like a really big crisis now in Colombia. Like thousands of Colombian people that were for years living in Venezuela, like they were like just like forced to leave all their things in Venezuela and come to Colombia. And like I visited the frontier before I come because of work issues, and like it's horrible. Like the Venezuela, they closed all the frontier with I don't know how
barbed wire.
Barbed wire, like yes, wire, and like they are all the Venezuelan military all stop, and they cannot let anyone pass. So it's like another thing. Like it's not only in Syria. Like we are also having that crisis right now. Just yesterday, our president sat down with Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela. They sat down in Ecuador, and like they began like to talk, and they say it's everything because of smuggling, things that we like as a Colombian, we understand it's not about smuggling. Like, if the problem was smuggling, we know there's a problem of smuggling. If the problem was of smuggling, it will not be like that how they expel all the people, or my like other Colombians that lived for many years in Venezuela, like small kids. Like they left sometimes, it was like just the mother and they left the kids over there, and like they just wanted for the kids like to bring them back. Like when I was in the frontier, I began to talk with all the people, with some of the people, and they were just saying like, I was just walking, they asked for my ID, and they saw like I came from Colombia, like I have an international ID, and they just broke it like in front of me, and they told me, okay, come on over here, you are now going to Colombia. So it's just like to raise awareness, like the problem is not only over there, we have like many problems and many issues that we're like in South America, Latin America.
Additional comments or questions? Yes, please.
All right. My name is Kanye Ori. I'm a professor of communication and conflict resolution at Independence College in Kansas. But my question is about the place you stage in these countries. How much do you adapt this place to account for cultural representation, cultural nuances?
It's an interesting question because it was a test. I was totally prepared that the kids would just giggle through the performances or walk out or be totally bored. So it was a test of the actors as actors with no scenery and no lighting effects and no costumes to speak of, to see simply whether the story of this girl, which I began to tell you, this girl Antigone, who I began to tell you today, could hold them, and if I would have to, as the adapter of the play, go into major rewrite mode to do it. And it turned out, now, Kenya is, of course, a former British colony, so English is a common language, although young people struggled with it. But aside from the language issue itself, they, of course, experienced the play differently than some kids up in the Bronx we play for. But not only did we not condescend to them in any way, because the ideas of the play are very difficult, they push. It sounds corny, but they actually pushed us to try to be smarter with the ideas in the play and express them more subtly as well as more powerfully. So that was the most amazing thing about the whole thing, is they just went, oh, we get it. She's a girl who's going to risk her life to do something that she believes is her religious duty. That was nuts. And it was thrilling, really. Now that may change if we go to the East or if we go to Colombia. We'll see. But that turned out not to be the case in Nairobi, Cape Town, and Johannesburg.
Final question or comment for Professor Mosher? Anyone?
Thank you all. Oops.
There we go. Okay.
Sorry.
Final comment question, please.
Sorry. I'll be very brief. I just wonder if you have any plan to go to French-speaking Africa, because usually those countries are forgotten because of the language barrier. But there are definitely kids down there who are allowed to experience.
They were not forgotten by me. My French is the French of a third grader. So I just had to go to where I are. But I don't think our company should be the only company doing this. And to work with a Francophone company on a similar project would be thrilling. And if you have any ideas as to how to do that, I'd love to talk to you about them afterwards.
All right, well, on that note, I'd like to ask everyone to please join in expressing our sincere gratitude to Professor Mosher for an excellent presentation.